Hey everyone, we're going to get started in just a few minutes, so hang tight. We'll be with you shortly. Hey everyone, hope everybody is doing well on this November evening. Thank you so much for joining us for this event tonight. Looks like we've got lots of people joining us from around North Carolina and outside of North Carolina, so welcome. My name is Jamie Rogers Southern. I am the Interim Executive Director at Bookmarks. If you are unfamiliar with Bookmarks, or if this is your first event with us, we are a literary arts nonprofit and independent bookstore based in downtown Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Our mission is to ignite the love of reading in our community with books that challenge, educate, and inspire. We've had a lot of pivoting this year, as everyone has, with COVID-related issues, and we have turned all of our in-person events to virtual events. And so thank you for joining us for this special one tonight. We wish that we were in person celebrating Vivian's cookbook, but are really happy that she could spend some time with us tonight. If you are not familiar with Crowdcast, you will see there is a chat box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Feel free to tell us where you're joining us from. Feel free to put any questions that you have there for Vivian as we go. We will get to those throughout the event. If you have any technical issues throughout the event, don't worry, we are recording this. So you can come back and watch it later if you have to leave early or if you're having any kind of technical problems. You can also try to use Firefox or Chrome. Sometimes those browsers work a little bit better for Crowdcast. So no worries, we will send this recording out to everybody tomorrow. So if you do have any problems or get kicked off, don't worry. We are going to get started in just a minute, and I'm going to bring Vivian on screen. Just a couple of things to note. Like I mentioned, we do have a lot of virtual events going on. We added a few for December coming up too, so please check those out. They're all available on our website, which is bookmarksnc.org. Okay, I'm going to introduce Vivian and get her on here because that's who you came to see. Vivian Howard is the New York Times bestselling author of Deep Run Roots, who we were very happy to have her in Winston-Salem for that first cookbook a few years ago. It was named one of the best of the year by 18 national publications. She won several awards for it, including the Cookbook of the Year award. She has co-created and stars in the public television shows Somewhere South and A Chef's Life, for which she has won several awards, Peabody, Emmy, and James Beard Awards among them. She runs the restaurants Chef and the Farmer and Benny's Big Time, and she lives in Deep Run, North Carolina with her family. So we're really excited about this new cookbook. This will make it taste good, and excited to hear all from Vivian about it. So I'm going to bring her on screen. If you will welcome her from your home. Hello, Vivian.
Hey.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, and thank you all for being patient with the time. I had a soccer game I had to go to. I mean, sorry, baseball. All the sports run together.
Sure. Well, and you've also just reopened the restaurant too, right?
Yes, we reopened Chef and the Farmer really last week, and it's been really interesting. It's hard to it's different, but we've made a lot of changes intentionally, and I'm excited for, I guess, what I see as the next chapter of the restaurant. But it's really hard to find people to work in the restaurant right now, so that's a challenge.
Sure. Yeah, I imagine we've different scale running a retail shop than a restaurant for sure, but you always want to be cautious and considerate of your staff and your customers. So we wish you a lot of patience and luck with that reopening. So we really are excited to hear about your new cookbook. We loved your first book. It was beautiful and just fabulous in every possible way. So congratulations on this new one. What do you think is different about this book? How will readers find your new book compared to Deep Run Roots?
Wow. Well, this book is a huge departure in so many ways, in that I think, Deep Run Roots was really kind of a love letter to a region and that region's foodways. And this book is really more of an expression of how I cook at home and how I came to be the person that I am. So while Deep Run Roots was really very narrative driven, the narrative was about Eastern North Carolina, and this book is also really narrative driven, but it's very much more about my personal and professional journey, and things like being a mom, things like being the daughter of a dad who was always on a fad diet, or how I came to develop these like 10 flavor heroes that the book is actually about. So there are a lot of similarities between Deep Run Roots in that they're both like organized unconventionally. Deep Run Roots, every chapter is about an ingredient. And in This Will Make It Taste Good, every chapter is about something that I call a flavor hero. Basically like a little recipe that, is not a huge time commitment, active time commitment, that you can use all throughout the way that you cook to make it more streamlined and more exciting. And so in a lot of ways, there's a lot of parallels between the two books, but the subject matter is really different.
So this book being a little bit of a memoir and a little bit of a glimpse into your personal life, what are you hoping it will reveal about you to your fans? Is there anything you're hoping specifically that people walk away from your book learning or knowing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that my tenure on A Chef's Life, and certainly the subject matter of that show and the subject matter of Deep Run Roots, you know, cast this facade that I am, a country girl who is a serious chef and takes, you know, smells, collard greens when she wakes up in the morning. But really, I don't take myself quite that seriously as a chef or as a home cook. I'm always looking for shortcuts to make things, delicious and satisfying. I'm more often than not, when I cook at home, I'm trying to hide vegetables in my kids' food and make, looking for versions of texture that are not, potato chips and, um, and fatty French fries. So
Right.
I'm the average home cook with a few tricks up my sleeve,
Mhm.
and I want people to know that, and I want them to, learn about my tricks.
So you mentioned your kids. I can't imagine having two. I only have one, and she's enough of a handful as it is. So you talked a little bit about trying to disguise the vegetables. What kind of advice do you give parents who are struggling to get their kids to maybe expand their foods that they will eat? Do you have any tricks you've learned?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my, greatest shames that, me, Vivian Howard, has children who just turn their noses up to anything that I want them to eat. You know, I just be careful, young parents with kids who are 2, 3, and 4 years old that
Mm-hmm.
love like roasted beets and, munching on kale, because, once they get out in the world and they go to school with other kids, they realize those things are not cool. And so you can't brag about it anymore. And I used to brag about how my kids loved all these vegetables and everything. And now they're probably the biggest fight we have in our house is what my kids eat.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do a lot of vegetable hiding, and I find that you know you can't you can't completely swap out uh, potato for cauliflower, but you can swap like a third, and they don't even know.
It's great.
And if you try and blend something green into whatever it is you're cooking, make sure it's spinach, because it has the least offensive. It has no flavor really, and it has the softest texture, and so they don't find little tiny bits in it, even if you use the NutriBullet, um, and even if you don't use the NutriBullet. But so there are tips and ways to hide food and hide nutrients in your kids' food that I'm hoping one day they evolve past this place of just pushing against everything I want them to eat.
Yeah, I am so relieved to hear that you struggle with it too. So that gives me hope. It's not just me.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
That's great. Well, so you feature several different ingredients in your cookbook and feature quite a few interesting recipes. I have to say, my coworker Ashley, who is watching tonight, is obsessed with the pickle pops, um, which sound crazy to me, and I love pickles. So tell us about some of the interesting recipes that you feature. Is there one in particular you think everyone absolutely has to try?
Okay, so I want you to understand that every chapter is about a recipe. So this book is very very outside the box, in that every chapter is about a recipe, and all the recipes have names. It's like that, names that personify what they are and what they do in your cooking. And within that chapter that is about a recipe, there's like 10 to 20 ways to use the recipe to like streamline the way you cook. So this book is about building a pantry, like a chef's pantry of little condiments and sauces and ingredients that are simple recipes in themselves. And so, the chapters are things called like Little Green Dress. So Little Green Dress is like a chimichurri and a salsa verde had a baby in a bed of olives. And it's called Little Green Dress because it's like your little black dress that goes with everything. And within the Little Green Dress chapter, I write a whole story that personifies Little Green Dress out in the world. I like dress up like Little Green Dress. Every chapter is personified in a multitude of ways. And then there are 10 to 12 recipes on how to cook with or use Little Green Dress, plus 10 to 12 no-brainer ways to use it that aren't even recipes. And so every chapter is equally exciting. One is called R-rated onions, and R-rated onions are about like a true, deeply slow-cooked, caramelized onions. I think as cookbook authors for so long, and I'm guilty of this, we write recipes so that they're digestible for home cooks. So when we want you to have a caramelized onion in a recipe, we say something like, caramelize the onions for 10 minutes. And really what we're saying is cook the onions long enough so they're not completely raw and they're burned on the outside a little bit. That's, we're not really encouraging you to caramelize onions. So this chapter is all about taking your onions from PG to R-rated so that they're silky and sultry and rich. And so I show you how to do that. And then within that chapter, there's me dressed up like making love to an onion right there. I mean, you don't get this in most cookbooks. And then this is like what the no-brainer page looks like, a bunch of ideas to use with the R-rated onions, and then a multitude of recipes. This one's called Pinch Me Frenchie. It's a monkey bread that's made with R-rated onions and Gruyere. It takes on the flavors of French onion soup. So to your question, what would be one of my favorites? It's, one of these 10 that the book is about. If you're going to engage with the book, and I think that if you do, I fully believe it'll change the way that you cook, you should make one of these 10 first. If I had to pick one of the 10, two of the 10, I would pick perhaps Little Green Dress, because it's made with ingredients that you can find at any Walmart anywhere. And that's what I base my shopping on, based on where I live. And also probably Community Organizer, and I'll show you that chapter. Community Organizer is basically kind of like a southern sofrito. It's tomatoes and onions and peppers and garlic and brown sugar and vinegar cooked down, and it becomes a base ingredient for like soups and sauces. And no-brainers for that, for a Community Organizer. And then Community Organizer with peas and beans and barbecue potatoes, roasting chicken on top of rice with Community Organizer. So it's just ways to use these ingredients
Right.
At night. Sorry, I just went on and on.
No, that was great. We have a question actually about the Little Green Dress. Barry is asking if there's anything that she can sub mint for.
Sure. So you can use just more parsley if you like, or you could chop in rosemary. You could use oregano. You could even use tarragon or chervil. I know those are more like esoteric herbs, but yes, you could go completely parsley, or you can fold in something more aromatic like mint, which the recipe suggests, or any of the herbs I just mentioned.
Okay. So you showed us a picture. The photography in this book is fantastic and just really great and fun and creative. And the photography in the first book was beautiful too. Can you explain that, how that process went? Did you have say in the pictures?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So with Deep Run Roots, I had no idea what it meant to make a cookbook. Like I was just so jazzed by the idea of writing it that, that's all I really thought about when I turned in the manuscript. I didn't realize that, really the work of making the book beyond the words had just started. And so when through that process, I learned a lot. I didn't participate uh, in that as much as I could have because I just didn't understand it. And so I really used the making of Deep Run Roots as a learning experience to inform how I wanted my next book to be. And the photographer of this book, Baxter Miller and Ryan Stansel, we work really closely together on a daily basis. Every picture you see of me basically is taken by Baxter. She shot all the photos in this book. She and Ryan styled it. We styled. I made every single dish in the book for the photos, which people don't realize this, but that's really rare for a cookbook, for the chef to write it and then also to cook and style all the recipes. So I'm so proud of that. And we used
Right.
a company that I love so much out of Burlington, Hand Ceramics. Uh,
Okay.
Most of the plates are from them. They do beautiful, beautiful work. Um, and the palette, the color palette of the book, and the plate palette and the styling palette, I think were honed in a way that made the images really stand out. And working with Baxter and Ryan was like such a gift, and I hope I get to do it again for another book. And I think the other piece that brought this book together in a way that like makes it kind of a complete package was the designer Laura Palese.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the cues you get, like the little buttons that speak to what the chapters are, and just the way you move through the book is decided by a designer. And being a part of that process is like a really beautiful collaborative thing that I really got to experience making this book.
I think sometimes as readers, we don't realize all of the people that go into making a book, especially a cookbook, because while the pictures don't matter as much as the recipes, they do grab
They
people's
do.
attention.
Yes.
So that's it. There are obviously a lot of people that came together to make the book, and it's really a beautiful package. They did a really great job.
I always say if you want to see how much heart went into a cookbook, you should read the acknowledgments first. And I think
Hmm.
you can see, you can just see through that part of it.
Sure. So I have felt bad for every author who's had a book come out this year during COVID. Gosh, what a hard time for a cookbook to come out. Did this year shape any of the book at all? Were you still writing it this year? Did anything?
Yeah. Yes, I luckily, for once, I'm not slow. I just got started very late for when I wanted to turn the book in. And so in March, I had already submitted all the recipes and the head notes, and I was still working on the narrative portion. And then in May, I was still working on some of the narrative portion, and COVID had totally reshaped my, like, whole world at that point, and certain recipes from this book, the little green dress, the community organizer, the red weapons, have become the kind of the central element of my business, in that we were selling them. I'd shut down my restaurants and we were selling these condiments through quarantine kits online. And so I was able to, you know, make that story part of this book, and really share how this book kind of saved my ass during this time. Not only because of writing and delivering it and then eventually publishing it, but also being able to take the recipes from it and sell them to people when everybody's sitting at home cooking. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I wish my book were out, because this is the perfect book for this moment in time. So I got to then include that story in the book. And so for the first time ever, it's great that I was late turning
That's
something
great.
in.
Well, unfortunately, as the numbers keep climbing in the country, I think over the holidays, your book is perfectly timed to help people make it through. So I don't think it's too late. I'm curious, you're from North Carolina. Do you consider yourself a Southern chef, or do you not think of yourself necessarily that way?
I mean, I'm a Southern person,
Mhm.
and I I mean, yeah, I mean, I think that I consider myself a Southern chef who has a lot of curiosities and interest, and has a wide palette.
Mhm.
But I've lived most of my life in the South. I and I feel most at home in the South. So yeah, I would consider myself a Southerner and a Southern
Mhm.
chef who's, always looking at the ever evolving South.
Mhm.
Uh, you-
Right.
we eat so much more and are so much more than the term Southern
Right.
traditionally meant.
Right.
And so for that reason, yeah, I mean, I'm Southern, and I cook the food that inspires me, that surround me.
I I think Southern food is such a big part of our culture. Are there any Southern chefs or Southern restaurants that have inspired you throughout your career?
Well, I've made a big to do about Edna Lewis's book, The Taste of Country Cooking, and
Mhm.
I'll continue to do that because it was the first time, her book was the first time that I'd ever seen like the food of the rural agricultural South um, really be exalted, and
Mhm.
exalted not only in recipes but also in story form. So not only did she give me the confidence to exalt the food of the place that I grew up, but also to write in the way that I write about food,
Mhm.
you know, using story.
Right.
Um, there are a ton of Southern chefs that I think are noteworthy and working hard, and all of those things. But I think that we should celebrate the independent restaurateurs in our individual communities,
Mhm.
and realize just the culture and the vibrancy and the life that they bring to the towns and cities that we live in. And we should celebrate them and patronize them every time that we can,
Absolutely.
because it's always been important. But if we want to keep that heartbeat in
Mhm.
our community, then those are the people we really need to be excited about.
Absolutely. I think our local restaurants say so much about our communities, and we're so fortunate here in Winston-Salem to have so many great, fabulous local restaurants. So I definitely agree with you there. Um, so you talk about several specific ingredients in this new book. I'm curious if there's any ingredients that you just hate working with, um, anything that you're just tired of working with. Um, if you have favorites, do you have any that are definitely not your favorites?
Well, I I don't. Can I talk about something that I really think people should cook with?
Yes.
Okay. So, I think that one of the things, and I think this is important or relevant during COVID, if you live in a city like Winston-Salem, where you have a Lowe's Foods, or possibly even, a Whole Foods, I don't know, that has a decent seafood section, then you probably have access to mussels.
Okay.
And I feel like mussels, they are often in the United States a farm raised product from, Prince Edward Island, so they're fairly sustainable. They are uh, they are not like a piece of fish that you catch and then you have like 3 days before it's not really tasty to eat. Things like mussels and oysters, things that are alive in their shell, have a longer shelf life, if you will, if stored properly. Mussels are really affordable, in terms of the seafood world, and they are very quick to cook. You can put rinse mussels. You don't have to trim beards. When you read about mussels, it's like trim the beards. Like the mussels that you buy in the grocery stores, seafood markets nowadays don't have a lot of beards because they're farm raised. Um, and they take 4 to 8 minutes to cook, and just a few ingredients. And that's something that we, when we were all dining out in restaurants all the time, that's a thing that we would order. One of my favorite things in a restaurant is mussels and broth with like some really tasty bread dipped in.
Mm.
And I'm here to tell you that's something you can make at home very easily.
Okay.
And it's a quick, satisfying, sophisticated meal that that'll make you feel like you're in a restaurant. And there's my whole argument for cooking mussels is in the book, and it's called Mussels Work.
Hmm.
And you get the pun, I guess.
Get it.
Yeah.
That's great. I have never cooked with mussels, so I will have to look at that and try
Well,
it.
that's why I made the argument, because I think most people don't,
Mhm.
but they're available and they're typically fresh and they're easy to cook. And so
Okay.
the big point of this book for me is to empower people to do things that they would not have otherwise done, and you know show them a new way.
I appreciate that being the most casual of casual cooks. So that's great. We have some questions here from attendees that I want to get to. This is a good one from Julie, who is saying that Alton Brown said in an interview that Food Network forbade him from doing an episode where he cooked a rabbit. And in A Chef's Life, you had a rabbit episode, but it began with a somber warning message. So Julie is wondering, was it hard to convince PBS to let you do this episode, and why do you think it's such a sensitive subject?
I don't even know if I should answer this question, because after the rabbit episode, I had a lot of like death threats and stuff by rabbit people.
Wow.
Um,
We can skip it.
no, but what I'll tell you, what I'll tell you is the reason that I did the rabbit episode is because, you know, one of my underlying messages is, believe it or not, eating less meat and eating more sustainable meat. And
Mhm.
rabbit is one of the most sustainable uh, proteins around, and it has more protein to fat than than any fish that we know.
Okay.
Its conversion ratio from energy to actual meat is the greatest of any protein that we eat. And so my reasoning for for doing the rabbit episode was just that.
Hmm.
Uh, and PBS, interestingly enough, believes in the mission of PBS is, television and programming that strives to make people's lives better. And that's really, the litmus test that they use for every episode. And they believed that this would.
Mm-hmm.
And also the commercial interests of PBS are very different than the Food Network.
Sure.
We do all the fundraising for A Chef's Life and Somewhere South.
Mm-hmm.
PBS, in some cases, invest a little bit of money, but it's not the same as like the Food Network is paying for your show, and they get to say what you can have
Right.
be a part of it or not. And that's one of the reasons I've always been on PBS, because
Yeah.
no other network would have let us make a show about Kinston, North Carolina. I mean, so.
Well, I think they really lucked out getting you and getting your shows. Kate is asking a question about Somewhere South. She says she's learned so much about diverse cultures from Somewhere South. What have you learned about how food can bridge cultural divides while doing the show?
Well, let me just say that Summer South, I'm so incredibly proud of the stories that we were able to share on Summer South. And, the whole purpose for it was, shining a light on stories that are not often told, and it in our region. And the overarching idea for me was like, to understand that, we all like bring something to where we are. Where, you know, we bring food traditions to a place, and that place shapes our food traditions. And showing that relationship between place and work and food and terrain and ingredients and community, and how it all kind of blends, I think is really the history of our nation.
Mm-hmm.
And it all started in the South, essentially. I think the South is our country's indigenous food culture. And I think capturing a glimpse of what that looks like in the American South right now is a time capsule that shows how we're progressing as a culture and a
Sure.
nation. And I'm so
Absolutely.
proud of, of Summer South. And if y'all haven't watched it, please do. Please do.
So Todd is asking, he's new to North Carolina from Boston and wants to bring a Southern dish to Thanksgiving that has your special touch.
Oh,
So,
me.
do you have suggestions for Todd?
Yes, Todd. So, if you're bringing something, in honor of me, I would argue it should be something sweet potato, because I live in Lenoir County, and we grow more sweet potatoes in and around Lenoir County than anywhere else in the world, for sure. So I would bring some candied yams, um, or a sweet potato chowder, or actually, no, no, no. Well, you're gonna have to get deep run roots, because there's an entire chapter on sweet potatoes.
Sure,
But
sure.
my favorite iteration of sweet potatoes is to roast sweet potatoes whole and
Mhm,
scrape out most of the flesh and use that for something like a sweet potato
mhm,
muffin, sweet potato
mhm.
biscuit, sweet potato pie, and then pan fry the skins and the little bit of flesh that's still inside, and drizzle that with like some maple syrup that's reduced with like a little bit of vinegar,
Oh
or from This Will Make It Taste Good, some of the sweet potential mixed with a little bit of vinegar. So something sweet potato.
that sounds amazing, and now I have to go do that immediately. So that sounds so great. Um, Let's see. Lisa is asking, do you find writing cookbooks as creatively challenging and fulfilling as cooking? Are they comparable for you?
Well, I mean, writing cookbooks is cooking. I actually do more recipe development writing a cookbook than I do at my restaurants nowadays. Um, Having a purpose of writing a cookbook and like centering it around themes is a huge driving force, like to develop recipes. As a chef who's known for a certain thing, um, like what we do at Chef and the Farmer, I don't have to push as hard to fulfill that kind of, you know, what Vivian Howard does. But when I'm writing a cookbook and developing recipes for that and developing understanding about why I'm writing that, it really it's reshaped the way I'm cooking in my restaurant right now. Our whole
Mhm.
restaurant is kind of designed around this book and the flavor heroes in it. Um, so I don't think the two can be separated.
Sure. Um, and I would argue that you've really already written a memoir in addition to cookbooks. Are you considering, would you consider writing in another genre? Do you think that would be part of your future? Maybe a children's picture book or children's cookbook?
Um, I would love to write about. I love language, and I think that my cookbooks are what makes them really special and unique in the genre is the quality of the writing and the storytelling. And so I would love the opportunity to write outside the cookbook genre and to
Mhm.
write about something other than me. Uh, so like a like
Mhm.
journalistic kind of opportunity
Okay.
would be awesome.
Well, I'm sure there are many publishers that would take you up on that. We will
Nice.
look forward to hearing those stories in the future too. Paula is wondering, for someone with celiac disease, are many of the recipes convertible to be gluten-free?
Absolutely. I would say about 60% of the recipes, 60 to 70% of the recipes in the book are already gluten free. And about 70% of the recipes in the book are vegetarian,
Mhm.
except about 30% of those have some form of anchovy in them because Little Green Dress has anchovy, Herbaceous has Worcestershire, but those ingredients in those, primary recipes can be taken out. So this book is for people who eat like I eat. I write
Mhm.
um, this essay in the book about my dad, who's always been a fad dieter. When I was a kid, he was always on some kind of liquid diet, or then, coming back from a diet, and this yo-yo diet, and there was just, and then I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and he'd be like in his underwear eating, cold cans of green beans and Vienna sausages, and then the next day he's on Optifast, and but in his 60s he became he got a little bit of what he calls sugar, which what most people call diabetes. And so he stopped eating anything white. So we treat, we have very little gluten in our house. He doesn't eat a lot of potatoes, white potato. He eats white stuff,
Mhm.
potatoes, rice, all of that when no one's looking. But
Mhm.
the way that I cook is really um, to suit his diet, and it is often without wheat and without a lot of meat. So this is a cookbook that works for I think a lot of households.
It's great. Allie wants to know, would you ever consider appearing on one of the chef competition shows? She says you're her absolute favorite chef, and she would love to see you on one.
Hell no. I've been asked to be on some of those shows, and I was intrigued by the idea, but I think really smart people, do really stupid stuff under that kind of pressure. And
Sure.
I've seen people that I admire so much, and I'm like, oh my God, I've got to watch my friend, and then I'm like, you know, unraveling under that kind of
Right,
pressure, and for what? Um,
right. It's stressful. Stressful
it's
watching them.
stressful. It's stressful.
So let's see. Mackenzie is wondering about the concept of your restaurant and how that's been affected by COVID. Are you having to make any shifts with that since probably you're not getting as many travelers coming through?
Yeah, well, we've been closed from middle of March until about a week ago, and we just reopened Chef and the Farmer, and we've opened our patio, and we're doing 50%, and we've really reimagined the entire framework of the restaurant.
Hmm.
And um, you know, one of the silver linings that COVID has provided me is that I got to take one step back and look at my restaurant footprint and how I felt about it, and what was working and what was not, and what was working for me personally and what was not. And so I've taken this opportunity to streamline what we do here in Kinston, and hopefully make it something that I can connect with in a real way
Hmm.
again and feel really great about. And but I it's very different what we're doing, and so I encourage you to come and check it out.
We're excited to come back now that you're open.
Thank you.
um, so I am curious, in addition to deep run roots, and this will make it taste good, what gifts are you considering giving this holiday season for the food lovers in your life? Are there any other cookbooks or any new things that you would recommend?
Yes, well, cookbooks definitely. The Great Book of Southern Baking by Kelly Fields. I've
Mm-hmm.
got it over here. The Good Book of Southern Baking by Kelly Fields just came out
Mm-hmm.
this fall, and it's if you have a baker in your life, there's like 8 biscuit recipes in this book, and Kelly is just so precise, and her recipes are so warm and approachable, honestly.
Okay.
So I would recommend that. I would also recommend, and I know this is like going to sound self-promoting, but this will make it taste good. All the chapters, all the heroes themselves make the most ideal consumable gifts. Like
Okay.
I have decided that I decided this several years ago, that I don't want anyone to give me a gift that I can't eat or drink,
Love it.
or rub on my body, like soap, lotion, food, but my body needs to consume it, or my pet or whatever. I don't want a thing that does not go
Wonderful.
away. And I think that we all can relate to that now that we've been spending so much time in our homes, and just trying to get rid of things that people
Mm-hmm.
have given us, that we love the people but we don't love the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so this book, every chapter is a consumable, like good, a recipe that has a very long shelf life, because they're either full of acid, or they have sugar, or they're somewhat fermented, or they're roasted, or they're a dry, spice rub. And so they make great gifts. And that's what we're giving, are things that you can consume. So I would highly recommend thinking of something like that.
I love that idea so much. And you are so right. After being in our homes for so long, I have gotten rid of so much stuff. So I am definitely going to adopt that thought for holiday gifts this season, either a
Right.
book
It's like
or food.
you could make a batch of, let's just say, red weapons. It's one of the easiest chapters in the book. You could make a batch of that, and it's would probably be 10 gifts that somebody would be so happy to get. And, I think
That's great.
whatever it is, if it's a flower vase full of greenery from your yard, like
Hmm.
give something that gets consumed or dies.
I love it. That's great. So, Allie wants to know, what would you say to young girls as advice to be a strong female leader like you are, especially in a traditionally male-dominated field? Do you have any advice for any young budding chefs?
Yeah, I mean, just don't be afraid of failure. Like, try try things and know that for every success you're going to have about 10 disappointments. I'm not going to
Mhm.
say failures, but uh, I think the more comfortable with taking risk in your professional life, the easier it gets to just keep moving fast, and the recovery time gets less. I mean, uh, with me, you only really see the positive things that have happened because that's what we publicize. But for all of those, there, you can't imagine the steps it takes to get there. So just take risk, try things, and also even if it's not the opportunity that screams the loudest to your interest, just make the most of every opportunity and find something inside of it that speaks to your curiosity and your ambition.
That's great. We are closing in on an hour, so I want to give you a chance to tell us about anything in the cookbook that you did not get a chance to tell us about that you wanted to make sure that you leave us with.
I don't know. I think that this cookbook is very unique in that it's a really uh, thoughtful narrative of my life. I think um, Deep Run Roots made people cry. I think this one does as well, but I think it also really makes you laugh. Um, my editor and so many people who worked on the book kept texting me like, "Oh my God, I'm howling laughing at this," and that makes me so happy because I think that's
Mhm.
really rare in a cookbook. And I think that if you read this book and you just take one chapter and cook make the hero and then cook with it, then the next weekend you're going to take two heroes, make them and cook with them, and then you're going to realize like how much power you've harnessed in these little recipes, and how much confidence it would have given you to cook without recipes.
Hmm.
So I really think that cooking this way gives you the opportunity to become a more empowered um, cook who loves cooking.
That's great. Well, I want to remind everybody listening that we do have signed copies of This Will Make It Taste Good. So you can certainly buy one for everyone on your list. And I think certainly everyone on your list needs one this holiday season. So thank you, Vivian, for spending so much time with us tonight. I
Thank
know
you.
your life is super busy, and we really appreciate you taking the time with us. And congratulations on another really stunning cookbook. It's really
Thank you.
fantastic, really well written, and we appreciate all the heart that you put into it, making it into the beautiful cookbook it is. So thank you and congratulations. Thank you everybody for joining us. We really appreciate that, and hope we will see you all soon. Everybody go see Vivian at her restaurant soon, and everybody
Make
stay
consumable
safe.
gifts.
I love that. I love everybody buy everybody food for holidays. Yeah. Thank you
Absolutely.
so much. We appreciate you
Thank
joining
you.
us, and see everybody
Bye,
again
y'all.
soon.